And in 1975, the makeup of the club in terms of cars was exclusively side screens. Wind-up window TRs were still associate members, and the TR7 had only been seen in car magazines so far. 35% of the membership then were TR2s, 15% were TR3s, and 50% were TR3As. Cheer from the back with the TR3As, well done. This was to change radically, and by 1980, the attendance at the 10th anniversary, right here at Hopcross Holt, was dominated, amazingly, by TR6s, just 10 years into the TR register. The late Alan Robinson did the first census on car ownership, but very soon there was a need to keep more detailed records on ownership of each model of car. Initially, Bill Piggott was sole archivist, but that later branched out from 1979 onwards into the extensive team of registrars we have today. So, up here on the stage, let's please welcome the first and the newest of the registrars that we have here in attendance this weekend. Please welcome Bill Piggott and Phil Horsley. Now, the great trick with this is you get people up onto the stage just as the main courses arrive, so it will keep them talking quicker. Bill, take the radio mic there first of all, and tell us about the formation of the first TR Register archive, your archivist role, and how the Registrars programme began.
Well, I'm sorry to have to correct you on both counts, Wayne.
I thought you might.
I was not the first archivist, and I was not the first registrar.
No, but you are the first that we have here this week.
I'm the first here tonight, because the first registrar was Alan Robinson, who was mentioned
Unfortunately,
earlier.
He's not here. Unfortunately, we lost him last year.
Alan, we lost last year, very sadly, unfortunately. But Alan started... I mean, the club was started as the TR Register. And the idea behind that was there would be a register of surviving cars, i.e. a list. That was the thinking behind the naming of the club. And Alan, although he was the club secretary, also took on the role of registrar about 1972, when I think the first lists were made. And they were the old-fashioned card index type of lists. And Alan kept the register, which was all the cars in the club, all mixed in together. There was no separate registers. But of course, most of the cars at that time were side screen cars, as you've already said. Alan kept that list until 1978. And so it was 6 years into the formation of the register as such, as a list of cars, that I took over. And we carried on running it just as a single register with all the cars mixed in the one list for, I would say, about another 8 years. I didn't look this up. I'm not sure exactly when that was changed, but probably in the mid-80s, right. We changed to separate registrars for each car. There was a 233A registrar, there was a 4 and 4A registrar, there was a 5 and 6 registrar, later split into 5 and 6 separately, and there wasn't a TR7 registrar because at the time they weren't allowed in the club. And that I would say was early to mid-80s. So that's the position on registrars. So I was the sole registrar for about 8 years, and I then, when we split it into different registers, took over the 233A registrarship and ran that for many years, finally handing that over in the late 90s, I think, to Mike Ellis, who's here today. So there've only ever been, in 50 years, 3 TR233A registrars. As regards archivists, that was set, the archive sort of, it was never set up, it just grew like Topsy. And the first person to be in charge of it was Keith Wigglesworth. And Keith ran that using the room at the front at Didcot that had no other use really at the time for, I would say, 6 or 7 years, basically collecting magazine articles about TRs, brochures, anything he could find that had a TR relevance, and assembling it all in the archive, along with back copies of the TR Action magazine. Keith did that for probably 5 or 6 years. I eventually gave up the registrarship in, I think, to Mike Ellis. You'd have to ask Mike this. I don't know whether Mike, who is in the room, can remember.
2003, you reckon, Mike?
Yeah. Was it as late as that, Mike? Oh, well, I obviously ran the 233 register for longer than I thought, probably nearly 20 years then. And I then took over the Archivists from Keith, and then developed it, acquired a lot more staff. I'd go to Automobilia shows, Bewley, places like that, collecting stuff that had TR relevance. And I had a moderate but welcome budget from the club to buy stuff. And that's really how it started. So I did one, then the other. I was never both at one time.
Well, I know how valuable the Registrars' input into TR Action magazine is, and how valuable they are for incoming members as well. I'm pretty sure one of the biggest draws that we have as a club to new members is the fact that they've got someone who holds records, has information on a particular model, and can give them their history of their vehicle. And it's always been that way, hasn't it?
That's right. And it was also very, very useful when the DVLA in 1991 decided, having spent many years saying, no, you can't do this, decided that you could at last resurrect an old registration number if you could prove that it had belonged to a car at a particular time in the past. In 1991, they finally said you can do that, but you've got to have written evidence. And the written evidence, they don't accept it any longer, but at the time they would accept an old club record as written evidence that a particular TR with a particular chassis number could reclaim a particular lost registration number. And the way the registration numbers had got lost was simply because cars had been off the road for donkey's years. The paperwork had been lost, the cars had deteriorated. Then finally, sort of by the mid-80s, people were looking these sort of cars out, restoring them, and what they wanted, not surprisingly and quite correctly, was the original registration number back. Now, the DVLA up until 1991 wouldn't allow that under any circumstances. So the register turned out at that time to be very useful, because it was able to say, yes, this car was on the register in 1971. Look, here's the original entry form that the owner at the time filled in. Chassis numbers there, registration numbers there. There's your evidence. We got a lot of numbers back over the years by doing that. Yeah. So I did that as a sort of subsidiary role, as well as being the registrar and then the archivist.
Brilliant. Well, of course, that duty then extends now, of course, to the TR register. When you go to the DVLA and you have to prove now that your car is mainly original and that it qualifies as a historic vehicle.
It's a lot harder than it was.
Yeah, the DVLA now say, go and ask the TR register, and no doubt that was in part.
Yeah, because we've reached a situation where the car clubs generally, and the register in particular, know far more about the cars and their records than the DVLA do. I mean, they don't have any records before 1979, and most between 1979 and 1990 don't exist, even though they should have. They did have them. They threw a lot away.
Indeed. Well, Bill, for all your years of service to the TR register, ladies and gentlemen, Bill Piggott.
Thank you.
Well, it's of TR7s I speak of now.
Yay! Good man.
Keep cheering. Thank you very much. And Bill, 10 years ago, for the 40th anniversary, working with Steve Redway, who was editor of TR Action at the time, produced a fantastic book, The History of the TR Register. And that book, for me, certainly, has been a bit of a Bible on understanding where this club has come from over the years. And Phil, there was a really interesting letter. I won't read it in full because you can find it in the book yourself. There's a very interesting letter. We often lament these days that TR Register doesn't have factory support because the TRs aren't in production anymore.
No.
But in the mid-1970s, the TR Register was offered factory support on the condition that, and I read the little extract here, on the condition that, given the uncertain future of the Triumph brand in the UK, that you accept and support owners of the Triumph TR7.
Yay.
Now, on that letter in Bill's book, you will find a note from Darryl that says, we must support these owners and we must discuss it at every meeting. Yeah. Unfortunately, it wasn't that urgent because it took the club 4 further years to allow TR7s into the club. Happily, though, that's all history now.
Yes.
Because TR7s and 8s, and of course the Grinnells that you represent, are very much part of the TR Register. We have a good showing of them out the front here now. And those cars, of course, now well over 40 years old.
Yeah.
And as Grinnell Registrar and as now TR7 Registrar, looking after things for a moment.
And downlines.
You are responsible for looking after a model, I guess, that appeals to a younger demographic, a new set of owners, and a different supply of cars to the TR Register.
Yes, I'd agree with that. Obviously, the younger people like the car, but I would say older members too, because it's quite interesting in the running Kennet Valley group. A lot of members now have bought a second TR, and guess what? It's a TR7 or a TR8 conversion, TR7 V8. And it's really about comfort, room, and still having that feel of a TR. The first TR7 I bought was, blooming TR7. That'll do as a winter TR. And within 3 months, I bought a cover for it. Because I suddenly realized a 4-speed, believe it or not, 4-speed TR7 tin top was a good car, yeah? And that car did a lot for me. And then one day in Gloucester, I was in a hotel and I was looking for TR Action. I saw Grinnell for sale in Gloucester. And I thought, what the hell's that? So I thought, just round the corner, I'll pop round. And there was this Grinnell. He said, have a test drive. That was it. That was sold. And then in 2003, when Mike took over the TR2, TR3 registry, Steve Redway, Roel Van Ness, and myself met at the Triumph picnic at Pangbourne. Do you remember Steve? Yeah? And Steve said to me, "You be a good guy. You should start the Grinnell Register." I said, "No, yeah. Steve, I'm a bit busy."
Steve said that to me once. You'll be a good guy. You can.
Yeah, so that's how it started. So I started on my own initially, and then I kept pushing into the register, and it got recognised. Yeah? And now it's worrying to me about the TR7 actually, because when you look at the availability of parts, when you look at the availability of the car, a TR8 is the rarest TR we have.
Yeah.
Yeah? You forget your TR5s, yeah. It's the rarest car we have, the TR8, particularly right-hand drive. So it really needs to be saved. And this year, the TR8 is 40 years old. It'll be celebrated at Gaydon in July 12th. So please come along and support it, because it is a TR and it's part of the register, and it's so good to see. Certainly the feedback I get as Grinnell Registrar and now caretaking TR7, I'm also getting the Dowlines record soon, which is good to see as well, because that's a great car as well. He did a lot for the TR7, TR8. And I get a lot of correspondence. We had just last week, it was Dave Warren actually, did my car originally have a black hood or a tan hood? Yeah? And Dr. Christopher Smith and I looked, checked the records, it was a black hood. And that's the key.
And of course, we've got people owning TR7s and 8s, and especially Grinnells and 7V8 conversions that are new to TRs. They've bought them because they like the car. And this is where, as a registrar, your job has turned into, from just looking after records and archives, to actually being the main face of recruitment for the club, hasn't it?
It has, yeah, and it's really pushing that mark with the younger people. When you see Charlie as well, coming through is fantastic on the youth group. And I think not just with TR7, TR8 Grinnell Registrar, please remember all the registrars. They do fantastic work in the background.
Absolutely.
Sometimes unsung work, yeah? If people forget about us a little bit, sorry to say it, but they do. And remember, we work hard, we keep a lot of records together. When you look at, with all the registrars, you ask them, like you're listening to earlier about part numbers, you know, they can quote you part numbers as well. You know, it's fantastic work.
There is a man at the back of the room there that can quote TR7 part numbers just as well.
Yes.
Simon Hebditch, Rob Sport with us, who's stood there shrugging his shoulders a bit.
Simon's a TR7 man, he definitely is.
He's locked in conversation, selling some more cars, I think. The two fingers was the right way round.
Yeah, it was,
But,
you just put 5 in front of it to make 7. That's right.
Great to have Simon here representing Rob Sport, of course, without whom TR7s and 8s would really struggle to be on the road.
Very true.
And thanks to you and all of the other registrars. And, of course, a big thought to the TR7 registrar, of course, that we lost this year.
It was really sad to lose Jim. Jim, fountain of all knowledge of TR7s, really keen, and it was really, really sad. And, you know, funny enough, Kat gave me the records tonight. It's come from his wife. And obviously it's about caretaking those now, moving them forward and working in what Jim would have wanted to develop the TR7.
And of course the archive and the registrars forge on into the future with digitised records now.
Rev up.
Yes, rev up.
Rev up,
We're now digitising the records for future posterity. So, Phil, thank you very much for looking after the TR7s in the TR Register. And a big hand, please, for Phil, for Bill, and for the registrars.